All right, Josh Smith here, live at my Flat Five Studios. Today's guest is a good friend of mine and just an incredibly great musician and guitar player. You've probably seen him on the road with a ton of amazing acts like Melissa Etheridge and Chris Cornell. And I mean, I could literally, recite the list for about 10 minutes if I felt like it. He's played with a lot of guys. He's also built up a really, really amazing YouTube channel and amount of content where he's one of the most resourceful and useful guys to players like myself. I go all the time if I want to check something out. The first thing I do is see what you thought of it or see if you have a video, because I know from your videos I will be able to tell if I would dig something or not, And so what a useful resource. But anyways, dude, I'm just so glad that we've connected over the years and gotten to hang at least a little bit. I hope we get to do that more because you really are one of my favorite players and one of my favorite dudes. So everybody, please welcome the great Pete Thorn.
What's up, man? Hey, thank you so much, man. For a minute there, I thought you were talking about Jimmy back there.
Nice.
He's going to hang out with us.
Yeah.
Hey, man, thank you so much for that intro. I mean, I'm always completely blown away and enamored with your guitar playing and everything I see you do. So it's always an honor. And I miss you. And it's like, we were just talking before we started the show here about that you just got to play 4 nights in a row in LA, and you'd be getting out and playing a little bit and stuff, and that makes me happy because I know you, the last time we spoke, you were really missing it, and so at least it's a little bit of getting out there and doing it.
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying before we hit record, as much as you do all those videos, and I was doing a bunch all during the first half of this pandemic, normally that's like just a chunk of what we are, not the entire pie. So it's like, it's weird when you've got to get all your, not that we're complaining, anything I do playing guitar any day is a great day, but yeah, it's like we're used to a certain way and we kind of associate a certain thing with ourselves personally, and yeah, it gets changed. You got to adjust. That's just the way it is. Everybody's had to.
Sure. Yeah. It's that balance of like doing what we do in these rooms and then getting out there and playing. I mean, you're literally sitting there in a control room, it's like, that's a beautiful thing. And then you got to, it's like almost like a 50-50 for me. Like I love being in the studio, and that's morphed into doing these videos and YouTube and kind of like a different angle, but I'm still sitting here playing guitar and recording music no matter what.
Yeah.
Doing that balance with the fun of travel and the energy of a crowd and feedback from people and just enjoying that whole experience has been my I mean, really the last 25 years or something, so it's like to not to all of a sudden stop. It's just weird, but everybody, we recognize, of course, too, that everybody's going through that in their own way, just like everybody's had disruptions with, I mean, just when I think about, I don't have kids, when I think about folks with kids and what they went through over the last, like having to homeschool and learn that whole, and the kids and how they have to adjust. They're used to going to school and being around their friends and stuff, and all of a sudden they couldn't. And, it's all these adjustments. So
Yep.
It's a crazy time,
Yeah, everybody's had to deal with it in their own way, and yeah, it's affected, every occupation in a different way. So, like you said, like for me, the thing, it wasn't even just the gigs that I missed the most. It was like the improvisational aspect of the gig. Like I need that. That's my drug. Like I need to be improving somewhere with other musicians, and yeah, to have that taken away was like a large part of my identity was just boop gone. Because we don't. It's not very fun to improv by yourself in a vacuum. Like it's just a different thing. So
yeah, I remember you saying that. That's what you kind of. It's funny because that actually hasn't been most of what I've done in my guitar. Like the guitar can be so many different things, and music can be so many different things. But that being your like the constant new feeding off of other musicians, as well as a different room, a different crowd, and seeing where that takes you.
Yeah.
And I get that too, because I do some of that, but you really live in that world. It's kind of, I mean, for me, that's sort of what it's like. Touring is like improv. It's like when you're in a new city and okay, I got to find my coffee shop for today, and what am I going to have for lunch, and what's down this street over here, and what's down, that's like improv.
Yeah.
And I love that too. So it's like that aspect of it is, God, it's just the whole thing. It's, some people don't enjoy the road. I think they don't. And you can tell when you get in a band and you go on tour with folks, like sometimes people will stay in more, or they feel like, oh, I've done it. I've been to Paris a million times. I'm not going to go out,
Yes.
or that kind of thing. And I understand that because it's just like different types of people. And as you age, you know, it can change and stuff, what you're interested in. I still feed off that. Like I really, really enjoy that. Like getting into it, like I'll wear out a pair of shoes, you know, when I'm on just within a few months, you know, on tour, I just walk and walk and walk. And I love that, being in some weird place and seeing where it takes me. And that's kind of like improv, I guess.
It absolutely is. Yeah. So okay, I start all these off by kind of asking everybody about their family and whether they come from a musical family and how the guitar ended up in their hands the first time. I don't know this story for you. For me, it was completely random. I'm not from a musical family at all. So what was I know you're from Canada. Did you have any musicians in your family, and who put the guitar in your hand first?
No, my folks listen to music, but my dad really always liked country music. So, you know, when I grew up, it was a lot of like, I heard a lot of like George Jones and Charlie Pride and stuff like that around, you know, from listening to my dad, and he liked 50s rock too. So I was hearing that growing up. But I think it was, to be honest, it was hearing the Charlie Daniels band and The Devil Came Down from Georgia. And I was like, I don't know, like when I was 9 or so, and I was like, I want to do that. Like I probably saw them on TV. I don't remember exactly where I heard it, but the fiddle, you know? And so I wanted a violin all of a sudden. So my parents got me a violin, student violin, you know, and they found a great teacher. He was a super nice guy, older guy. I mean, he would have been almost probably 70 or something when I started taking lessons. I was like 9. But he got me interested in it, you know, it was more like it wasn't violin. I was playing fiddle. I was learning like jigs and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And so I did that for about a year, and then a kid moved in. So now I got the music bug a little bit, and I enjoyed it. It wasn't like I was obsessed with it, but I enjoyed it. And so so then well, okay, let's see. About a year later, a kid moves into my neighborhood, and he was from Vancouver, and his dad had gotten transferred to Edmonton for business. So he moves into my hood. He's 14, I think, and I'm like 10. And he was, when I think back on it, he was very, very like just advanced beyond his years when it came to his listening tastes as well as musically. He could play a few different instruments. He played keys, was his main instrument. He was really good, but he had this massive record collection. I mean, one of those big, you know, where it's just like a couple walls of albums, you know, and his musical knowledge was deep. And he's got me all of a sudden, well, he was nice enough to hang out with me because I'm a few years younger than him. And I think he had trouble making friends because maybe he was a little wacky. He was like so kind of different with this advanced musical taste. Maybe he just didn't relate to other kids. So he wasn't hanging out with a lot of other kids his age in the neighborhood, and I would come around and he'd be like nice enough to hang out with me. And he kind of schooled me in how to listen and how to discover music, you know? So, you know, he'd sit me down, put the headphones on my head and like put on Sergeant Pepper's or something and hand me the LP jacket and go, now he kind of like a parent. He'd be like, or like an older brother, I guess. He'd be like, you don't have to fidget around, like don't screw around, just sit there and listen, you know, and read this while you're listening. Okay, you know, do it, you know, and I'd be like, wow, it's amazing. I'm discovering all this music all of a sudden. So, I mean, it was everything from The Who to Van Morrison to the Beatles to the Beach Boys. He was really into the Beach Boys, and he had a lot of, you know, so I was all of a sudden listening to Pet Sounds and all these amazing records. And, but he was a little bit of a snob too, a little bit of an elitist, and he wasn't into any kind of hard rock or metal. That was stupid to him. He was more like, he was a total mod if it came to, you know, as opposed to the rockers, you know. Well, my sister was the rocker, and she's a few years older than me, and she started listening to, she got really into like that second wave of you know, like British heavy metal, and so she was into Judas Priest and Iron Maiden and Thin Lizzy and like all kinds of stuff coming over from that side of the pond. She's listening to that. Well, he didn't like that stuff, but I kind of like that stuff, so like I'm listening to that too, but I'm keeping that, you know. And so I'm getting my vast majority of musical stuff from this guy Bob, and then my sister's like the metal and hard rock side of it. I'm hearing that too. So I want to pick up a guitar now because I'm listening to all this music. I want to play guitar, and the first song he ever showed me on the guitar was "Can't Explain" by the Who.
Oh wow!
So he shows me the power chords, and I'm like, I can do that. Like I could do it. It was like, wow, it sounds like the song, you know. It's that always had an impression, like from day one, I could make something that sounded like music and like a song that I knew. And I was a really big Who fan. So like the Who and the Beatles were kind of my big initial influences. So I'm taking the violin lessons all this time, and the violin teacher, he doesn't know how to play guitar. So he says, I'm going to introduce you to a friend of mine that's a really good guitar player and music instructor. And that was a fellow named Terry McDade in my hometown. Now Terry's a bit of a musical legend in Edmonton. He plays numerous different instruments, and he's been teaching for his whole life, I think. He plays the harp really beautifully, and he's one of the only people I've ever met that plays harp. And he actually teaches harp in Edmonton, and he owns probably like 12 or 15 harps or something, and he rents them to his students, because where do you buy a harp, right?
Right.
And, so he's a deep dude, and his whole family are musicians, and they've actually they used to be called the McDade Family Band, and then they went on to just be called the McDades, and they've actually won Junos up in Canada and stuff for the really like amazing group of players. And it's kind of traditional, but they've modernized the sound a little bit. There's his daughter plays violin beautifully, she's awesome, and there's mandolins and stuff. They're just a really interesting group of musicians. So I get involved with this very musical family, and he was such a great influence on me. And he's really one that, long story short, sort of steered me down some great roads and gave me the, at least initially, the confidence that this is something that I could do if I loved it. He could see that I loved it. And in a city like Edmonton, which was a bit like being a professional musician was maybe not, that didn't seem like to a lot of folks there that was a legit career path, especially not at that point.
Right.
And like probably from a lot of towns, like, oh, you're gonna get a real job, music's just for fun or whatever. But Terry was like, first of all, he was making his living playing music, so I could see somebody at that young age that was doing it and seemed very happy to me. And the whole family was doing it, and they seemed like a really cool, happy family. So that was important for me to see. And then also him just introduced me to some other folks that steered me down a similar path. A guy named Brian Hughes. So at one point, after a few years, I was 13 or so, Terry said, I want to send you to somebody else, because you're getting to the point where I think somebody else can show you more than I can. So Brian is another instructor I went to. Well, Brian's played with all sorts of folks from Canada and all over the world and produced records. He's a wonderful jazz guitar player. He's got a great jazz career, but he can kind of play all styles. And he travels to Europe. He goes to Greece. He goes all kinds of places and makes records with people. And he's a producer, a great guitar player. So meeting these people, that was just my long-winded way of saying all this had a huge impact on me, and I saw it was possible from a really young age to have a career, and get up and play music, maybe for a living, And Brian would actually he had a club band in Edmonton that did mostly rock and pop covers and stuff. And I would sneak into the bars, and he would get me up to play. And so I was like 14, and that was like huge. Almost I'm on stage with all these guys that are,
Right.
Probably late 20s, mid 30s, something like that. And they're kind of cracking up at me, as this little kid, and then I'd play and I'd do okay, and then I'd get the confidence to do more of that. And it was like, I had the bug.
Well, yeah, the bug is, once you get the bug, it sounded like, you had it kind of instantly, and things progress very quickly when you have that mindset and the obsession sets in. And, so what did your parents think when maybe it became obvious, that this was the way you were going?
They were pretty cool overall. I think my dad always wanted me to go in. My dad, having said that he listened to country and enjoyed music and stuff, he didn't really understand anything about the music business or have any awareness. That seemed like a crazy idea to him. And my relationship with my dad was maybe fraught with some tension and stuff for that and for other reasons, like throughout my teen years, and then got much better later on, I feel like. But it took a while. It took me, my dad, all the way, I'd probably been on the Tonight Show like 4 times and been on numerous tours and stuff. And I would still go home. And my dad would say, what are you going to do if this doesn't work out?
Right. Yeah.
I'd be like, Dad, for better or for worse, like I'm now like whatever in my early 30s or whatever I was, and I'm a professional musician. We need to learn how to relate. you
Yeah.
know, as two adults, and I'm a professional musician. And you know, at some point I think he accepted it, but it
Yeah.
was never maybe easy for him. My mom was very supportive and, you know, drove me to guitar lessons. And then this is in Edmonton, like in the dead of winter when it's like maybe -30 outside or something. And she's sitting in the car outside for a half an hour waiting for me while
Oof.
I'd go for, yeah, you know, she was very, very supportive. And I can clearly remember being 14 years old and getting the MI catalog in the mail, GIT. And, you know, it's the mid 80s at this point. GIT was a really, really big deal at that point with folks graduating, Frank Mbali or Paul Gilbert, or these types of folks that you'd hear about coming through the school. And so I was reading the catalog and I was like, I want to go to this school. This is what I want to do. I'm going to go to this school. Like, and my mom was like, you know, I think I was home from lunch, like from junior high, I think, you know, so I'm home. It's like 12:30. I'm reading the catalog while I'm eating my sandwich or whatever, getting ready to go back to school. I'm going to go to this. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. My mom was like, okay, well, if that's what you want to do, I think that's what you should do, you know? And it was like that. And I wavered a little bit throughout the next few years, but by the time I was 18, I was pretty dead set. That's what I was going to do. And I just did it. It was like this focus of like this naive, but very pure, like, this is what I like to do. I've seen people do it for a living. They seem happy. It's a hell of a lot of fun. Why would I do anything else? I'm going to go do this, you know? Of course, then I moved to LA and, you know, within a year or so, I'm doing things like rolling quarters for rent money, you know, like finding I can remember living on $13 one week. That's all I had for a week. And I made it work, you know, with like peanut butter and Wonder Bread and, you know, whatever I got from the store. And I made it work. And it wasn't, you know, I paid my dues for sure.
Well, I mean, coming from Edmonton, not that it's, you know, completely impossible to have some sort of musical career and live there, but I mean,
Yeah.
when you got to GIT, besides the fact that you maybe already knew you needed to be somewhere else if you wanted to do this for a living, it must have been eye-opening to all of a sudden be surrounded by a ton of like-minded individuals who pretty much wanted what you wanted, to go there
Yes.
and grow as a musician, but then to make a life out of it as well. So I mean,
Yes.
I mean, it must be a pretty amazing environment. I didn't go to college or anything like that, so I can't relate 100%, but I'm sure that was really a great environment.
Yeah, I mean, just really the city in general. That's part of what I loved about LA. Well, okay, it is possible to have a career like someone like Terry in Edmonton,
Right.
playing music. There's plenty of musicians that have, you know, that have, I'm sure, come out of there and had great careers and been able to stay in Canada and do their thing. There's lots of examples of that. So, not downplaying that, but as when you move to a music center from anywhere, I wanted to take it to the wall. You know, I really wanted to be up on that stage. I wanted to go back to Edmonton and play, you know, at the Northlands Coliseum on that stage with somebody, or be like, I'm going to play with these people that I see, my heroes or whatever. I was like, I'm going to take this all the way. And
Yeah.
that's what I wanted to do, even at 14. So it was like, I would just visualize that, you know, when I was younger, like, you know, when you listen to music and you imagine you're in the band, you're on stage, you know, playing with the, you know, the artist that you're listening to. I would always do that when I listen to music. It's almost like I couldn't not do that. I was always like visualizing that. And so then when I moved to LA, it was almost like, yes, it's for sure. MI was the microcosm of the energy of LA, everybody moving to do something that they love and their crazy dream. But LA in general, that's one of the great things about it, is you got a lot of writers and actors and you know, even just people in the film and TV and music industry that are you know, doing other jobs. Like, folks move because that's what they want to do. They come to LA to pursue a crazy dream that might not seem, you know, viable in other places. And it's generally people that are really willing to put it on the line, at least for a while, and take it to the wall and see what happens. So I loved that energy. You know, the downside of that is it's a lot of narcissists in this town. You know, and you do almost have to be like, there's a certain degree of self-absorbed and, you know, dedication, because you just have to turn everything off and be like, I'm going to work on this song for the next 3 days, and just, that's all I'm going to do. That kind of focus. And sometimes it's at the expense of other things, like, people tend to have families later here and stuff like that. And, sometimes maybe not at all and that kind of thing. So there's always this trade-off, but there's a positive, like your crazy dream or whatever, you're surrounded by people doing it. So it seems more normal. I don't know if you felt this, but like in my hometown, there were some really great players, but a lot of times people would be like, there wasn't an urgency. Like, oh, I'm in a band, we're going to write some songs, but we're going to maybe do some recording next month. We're going to write a few tunes, get a demo done. That kind of, and in LA, it's more like, we're going to write, these tunes today, we're going to record tomorrow, and it's going to come, and then we're going to book some gigs. It's like a much faster pace and dedicated without getting distracted by life. And it's, it's just being in it's an energy.
100%. I mean, you move here for a reason. And where I grew up, there was a little bit of there's a scene in Miami and Fort Lauderdale. It was a very big Latin music scene. And like the Estefans and that were huge when I was a kid. So there was a lot of that Miami Sound Machine thing going on. There were gigs that kind of were based out of that area. And there were a lot of good musicians because UM is such a good jazz school and music school. And there were a lot of guys going there and stuff. But yeah, I kind of knew even then too, like, if I wanted to make more than just, playing at clubs every night during the week and doing the odd occasional session or thing, that I had to go somewhere else. And like you said, it wasn't that I couldn't make a living and be a professional musician there. I could have. It was to do the things I really wanted to do, I had to go somewhere else.
Yeah, maybe like I know there's a lot of scenes in the country where there's a lot of covers going on, or corporates, or those types of bands and you can make a great living going and doing that stuff, but you're generally playing other people's music and doing, that kind of thing. If you want to make records and like play with like, if you want to be a sideman, play with the top. I mean, like you say, there is a scene for sure in Miami that's like the Latin scene and stuff. But outside of that, if you're rock musician, jazz musician, country musician, you kind of, I think if you want to really go to the wall with it, you got to go elsewhere, maybe, to pursue.
So while you were here going to GIT, I'm assuming obviously you're making friends. You maybe start playing gigs around town with different people, whether it's just bands you start with your friends or start picking up the odd casual and the odd gig here and there. I think pretty quickly you probably know you're not going to leave here. Because maybe you get that first taste of like a gig that actually pays some real money. We know that feeling too. You had to have known right away, right, that this was it. You had found your place.
I did, at least initially, and was really enjoying myself. And it did get difficult though. At times, I joined a band that I eventually ended up getting a record deal with. So it was with a friend of mine named Frank Symes, who was a really powerful influence on me, as well as a big help in me furthering my music career. But he was at the time, had just gotten a gig with Mick Jagger to do the Wandering Spirit solo album. And he was also Don Henley's musical director. So so he was like a heavy dude, and he toured with like Warren Zevon and like all these different, he was like he was late 30s at the time, and he was just a really, really talented guy.
Right.
So I got a gig and I went and auditioned, and that was through the MI Musicians Referral Service that I met Frank. And I went and auditioned for his original band because he was working once again, this energy in LA of here's this guy with a gig with Don Henley, Mick Jagger, also working on an original project at the same time.
Right.
That kind of, thing was I want to be around these people. So you got to go to LA to do that. So, I was very young. I was like 19 or 20, and 20, I think. And he was nice enough to, I went and auditioned. He liked what I did, and I got in his band. But to just play and kind of, get practice and stuff like that. And just because that's what musicians do, they did a lot of gigs actually kind of right next to where you played in Pasadena the other day. We used to play all the time at a place. It used to be a kind of pizza place bar called Domenico's, but it was literally next door to where you played at that, the German bar in Pasadena the other day. Yeah. And so we used to play there every Tuesday, and, play in Arcadia and like all over the place, because it was kind of that like San Gabriel Valley, Pasadena area was where he lived and stuff, and so it was kind of centered out there. But So playing around a lot and doing these, you know, like the thing that really had an impression on me with him was like, here's this guy that's playing with Mick Jagger and Don Henley, but you'd pull up to these cover gigs where everybody was going to make $60 a night or whatever, and you know, he'd be humping the PA in and bringing in his 412 cabinet and setting it up with his high watt head and stuff, and just like all of us. And then he would play, and he would always play exactly the same, no matter whether he was in front of 4 people or if 20,000 people. He just played with all this energy and like a kid, like kind of like excitement about playing guitar. And I was like, oh, light bulb went off. Like, you don't play different when you're just playing a bar gig versus an arena gig. You play the same, and that's why you get to play the arena gig, because of this energy. And you never know when people are going to, it's like the story about like when Van Halen got signed and there was nobody in the room, but they blew away, you know, Ted Templeman and Mo and the folks that were there to watch him. So all these lessons I was learning, like, wow, he's not too proud to, you know, not, you know, he's humping the PA, he's like making the same, you know, this, you know, few bucks a night. We're basically doing this for practice and for fun, because that's what you do when you're a musician, you play for fun. So, you know, and for the love of it. And so I learned all that. But I will say that after a number of years, I was starting to get a little disillusioned, because it kind of wasn't taking off, and I was struggling a bit, like just you know, it was difficult financially and stuff. So I was like, what am I going to do? And I actually, we had worked at this point, we'd written and demoed 50 songs, and we'd almost been signed by RCA, just like this close to inking a deal, and then it didn't end up working out. And, you know, I'd learned a lot about songwriting and about how to use a compressor, how to use an EQ, how to mix and all this, mostly from Frank, spending all this time like in his home studio doing all this stuff. So I'd gotten a great education, but I was starting to become a little disillusioned. And I decided I was going to go. I was like, I think I need another, like, and I kind of wanted to go home, and I loved Vancouver. I loved the West Coast of Canada. And so I had a place set up there to go to, you know, my friend, he needed a roommate. So now I've got a room in Canada. I'm like ready to go. And, you know, I like actually give notice on my place and stuff, and I'm going to leave. And I've got like 2 weeks before I'm supposed to go. And I get a call, and it's Frank, and he says, I think we got a record deal. And I was like, what? Like, we haven't even been actually actively playing that much in the last few months leading up to that point. It felt like it was nearing the end, you know, of this project, like it wasn't going to fly. And what had happened was, Frank was, he grew up in Japan. He's half Japanese, and he grew up actually speaking Japanese as his first language. But his father was a lawyer for the American military. So he grew up on a military base with a Japanese mother and, you know, American father. And he learned fluent Japanese, and he had no accent. And he, you know, as it is when you learn a language when you're really young, he had no accent in Japanese or in English. So he could, long story short, speak fluent, really great Japanese. And what had happened was that somebody had said, you know, you should translate a few songs into Japanese and sing them. And I can try and get you a deal in Japan. If nothing works out in the States, then maybe, you know, you can get a Japanese record deal. Well, we had done this, and he had kind of gone and done it on his own, like just sang 3 of the tunes and sang them, translated them, sang them in Japanese, sent them off to Japan. And that had been like a year and a half earlier before this. And it was a blip in my memory that he'd gone and done that. Well, that's what we got this call from Japan, and it's like, Sony in Japan wants to sign you guys. And so this is how my love with Japan starts. The next thing I know, I'm on a plane to Tokyo, and I'm sitting in an office at Sony in Japan. They're saying, we think you guys are going to be the future of Japanese music.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And it was just like, what is happening? Like, and I'd never been to Japan. It was just so like fun. I was like, okay, this is amazing. So we actually spent about 12 days over there, or 14 days, something like maybe almost 2 weeks, you know, kind of working out this deal. And then also doing some writing with another Sony artist that ended up becoming very famous over there, Ami Puffy Yumi. It was like a duo, two girls that got signed. They've, you know, huge hits in Japan and stuff. But Ami was the girl. She was like totally unknown at the time. So we wrote and recorded some stuff with her. So all of a sudden I'm doing this stuff, and it's like, well, I can't leave now. I got this, you know, now this is, and I'd literally given up my place in LA, and I had to move out and get another place because, like, I, you know, give them notice, and it's like, now that So that's what happened. But it was really down to 2 weeks before I was gonna, and my whole life would have been different. I wouldn't have probably done any of this stuff that's happened since.
Yeah.
But it's wacky the way things can happen. I feel like I'm getting long-winded today with these stories. Sorry.
It is incredible how those things happen, and you try your best to kind of, manage what you're going to do with your life and plan out what you want to happen. And
Yeah.
then, one little thing changes everything. And you don't
Yeah.
even realize it quite as much at the time. But when you look back, it's like, that changed the next 20 years of my life, like, yeah.
Exactly. Somebody you meet, because through Frank, we did that deal, and then it didn't really, like, it did okay over there, but it didn't
Sure.
really, after a year and a half, it was kind of done. But now I'd had a deal and made some money, and I was able to move on and do other things. And but you're absolutely right. Like a few years later, actually, Frank called me and asked me if I wanted to audition for Don Henley's band, and I went and did that. And didn't get the gig that time, but I was like the runner-up for the gig.
Right.
Keyboard player that I actually brought into the audition got the gig. And a number of years later, 2009, he has now become Hanley's MD, as well as the Eagles MD. He calls me in 2009 and says, "Hey, you want to come back and audition for Don again?" And I went down and got the gig that time. So between when I met Frank, which is 91, and 2009, Frank was the reason that I ended up with that Henley gig. I mean, partially, the initial, but there's 19 years of span there of time before, and then I end up playing with Don, taking his place in the band, actually, when he ended up going to play with Roger Daltrey. So crazy. But you're absolutely, that's it. One person you meet, one band you get in can affect your whole, somebody you meet in passing. It's wild, how it pans out.
It is wild. So now that you've kind of, I guess, you've probably had some time over these last 2 years to think about all that stuff a little bit more, to look back at all the tours you've done and all the things you've done since you've been here. Was it like a blur, when it was going on? I mean, because you go from this tour to that tour, and I didn't do nearly as much as you did, but I did a decent amount of that, jumping from tour to tour and going out on the road. And it was a blur to me. I can't imagine what it was like to you going from all those tours back to back, because you have this need to, like, you got to keep up the income, obviously, and be responsible. And, you get yourself into certain situations in here in LA that you need to be able to handle. But it's like this, we all know you have that great year and then the okay year and then the really great year and then an okay year, and did it just fly by, and
yeah, it kind of did. Like a lot of it, I see videos now of gigs, especially with Chris Cornell, because we played so much. I see videos and I'm like, that's me, but I don't remember that, like where it's like, and it bothers me a little bit, to be honest, because I'm like, well, I mean, the one thing I will say is to always try and be present when you're in the moment and playing and remembering that it's not always going to be there, especially when somebody like Chris, who's now gone, it's like, don't take it for granted. And really, when you're having a, even if you're not having a great time, like, appreciate it all, because at least you're up there playing music, and it's like, it will end at some point. Every gig comes to an end, and it's like, I miss that guy so much, and playing with him, that's a good, that feels like a blur, that period. I remember a lot of it, but you probably had that where you see yourself, right on stage at some video, and you're like, what the hell is that gig? And like,
there's a lot in my mind
watching somebody else.
A lot in my mind, some of the touring stuff felt like, oh, I toured with that person forever. And then I look back at like calendar books and stuff, and it's like, I toured with that person for 4 months out of my life. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that much, but it feels like a major moment of life, each one of those things. And it's weird. Yeah, it's very weird.
Jimmy Page in that movie, It Might Get Loud, he says, every moment on stage, we were totally living. And I totally related with that when he said that. That's what it's like. You're really in the moment. But I was taking it as he was being present. He felt really alive. And you're not waiting for the next thing. You're not lamenting something about the past. That's impossible on stage in the moment. You are in the moment. And that's sometimes, if you're a little zoned out or in a bad mood or not feeling the mix or like something, I can get a little in my own head. And I'm like,
sure,
forget that. Like, just remember you're on stage and it's this, and that you're living, this is it.
Yeah.
you've arrived to this moment and you're alive, and it really feels like you're present, as long as you're tuned into it. It's just, you just have to tap into it, and always, that's my goal, like on stage, is to really be, I love that feeling, man.
That's the best feeling. The best feeling. So
Yeah.
okay, so when you okay, when you start doing what you do a lot now, which is, I guess, for lack of a better word, content creation.
Mm.
Was it just out of fun to
Yeah.
initially start it? Was it out of necessity? Because I mean, you were working a lot already. I remember when
Yeah.
you first started doing some of these videos, gear videos at least, that you were on the road a lot still and doing things in between. Was it just like, I'm going to pick this up kind of casually, and, it just kind of turned into what it turns into, which I'm familiar with how that happens, but I assume it just had to be kind of like I'm going to do a little bit of this thing.
Exactly. Really was just for fun. I mean, if you look at the very first videos I uploaded to YouTube, it's me like playing my Comet amp super loud in my place.
I know that video. Yeah.
Yeah, just like, hey, check out this amp. And like, it's funny because I just did one of the train wreck a couple weeks ago here, and that was so fun. But that lineage of amps, just turning up an amp really loud. Yeah, here's something that people on YouTube might like, I'll
Right,
rock
right.
this thing. And it really was like, I had no idea I like teaching. So I put up some lessons, and I quickly saw that, like, oh, this is cool, because you can I had taught a lot of private lessons, and you teach, and then if it's not being videoed or recorded, it just goes out into the ether, and the student maybe picks up, hopefully 5 or 10 or 20% of what you taught them, but
Sure.
it kind of, they go home and probably forget some of it if they didn't record it. Well, this way it's archived, and there it is. And not only that, you teach it once, and then it lives there forever, and a lot of other people can benefit from it, like for forever, because it's a document. And it's, so that, like, oh, this is a much more efficient way, of getting across an idea that I've taught maybe 400 times in individual lessons. Here's this thing, check out this concept. Now I can just do it once and then show it to exponentially more people. So that became really clear to me right away, that was that made a lot of sense. But it really was just a haphazard thing that I would have thought more about, had I had to know what YouTube was going to become. Like,
Sure.
I would have, because when you watch channels now, that are really, some of the best channels out there, really big channels, have folks like Rick Beato, or
Yeah.
I mean, even you getting into it at the stage that you got into it, it was pretty developed. And I think you were like, well, here's my concept for my channel a little bit, maybe, like, at least maybe, I mean, you tell me, like, initially, maybe it was like, oh, I'll just have some fun. But then you're quickly probably like, I mean, the Flat Five show stuff. So like, you got these concepts, you're like, I can see the
Yes.
way I want to develop this for my thing.
Yeah, but it was more because I'd seen what other guys like you and Rick and guys have done. It felt like I can't just throw this shit at the wall and hope it sticks. I need to have some idea relatively quickly. Plus, I was more excited about it at that moment when I was first started doing them, so I wanted to try to put some effort in and see what I can come up with.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that the most successful folks at it tend to have a good idea and a concept before they begin, and then, like with anything, I guess, like with the song, or I mean, I guess songs kind of come out of nowhere, but maybe it's more like a direction for an album or something, or a direction for a tour.
Okay, yeah.
Here's our theme for this tour. It's going to be about, I remember doing a tour with Don where it was like, it was in the fall, it was in October, and he's like, let's do a fall theme tour. So everything from the lighting to the stage to the songs that he picked for the first half of the first set, he did some really cool covers. It was all fall themed. So something
Right.
like that, where you've got an idea and a concept, and as opposed to just kind of throwing things at the wall, which is fun too. But I remember Paul David saying to me once, have an idea, always have an idea. Don't make a video if you don't have an idea. Like, and I think he just meant like the way it's going to look, what it's going to be about, everything down to the thumbnail, down to the the concept. He's really brilliant that way with his videos. This YouTube community, I will say, it's a really fun, different way of being creative that I do enjoy, that I really enjoy. Some of the folks I've met, folks like Paul, folks like Rick,
Sure, yeah.
Adam Neely. I mean, there's some really brilliant, talented people. Adam's like a fascinating guy. That I just, it's like, wow, he's a young guy and he's so smart and so musically, just adept and skilled, and he makes really beautiful videos too. So it's like a different skill set
Oh yeah.
that I've really enjoyed getting into. And I feel like it's kind of like, it's also very empowering because you're not working for anybody. You're doing your own thing.
Sure, yeah.
Which is a great thing. It gives you the feeling of independence and not having to take work because you mentioned a little bit earlier that you can have an up year and a down year and an up year. And that was what, like, touring for me was always like, when job security is knowing what you're doing for the next 3 months. Most
Yeah,
people
yeah.
maybe can't relate to that. Maybe during the pandemic, it's become more like common that folks out there can relate to that. But we're constantly searching for work our whole lives. Basically, when you feel a tour as a sideman winding down, and you're always gauging what the artist is saying. Are we going to make a record? Are we going to, like, what's going to happen next year?
Right.
And many times you just get that sense, like, I think this is coming to a close. And then you're like putting in the calls going, hey, I'm going to be looking, because everybody always assumes if you're a road musician that you're working when you're gone. Like, so they don't call you for things. Oh, he's in that band, he's got a gig.
Right.
It's like, you got to get out there and put start beating the street. Hey, I'm sort of looking for something, if you hear of anything. And that cycle can get a little exhausting after 10 or 15 or 20 years, I think. So the YouTube thing was, I don't take it lightly that that's the thing that actually gave me the freedom to not be on that treadmill all the time and be able to take a little bit more control of my life as sort of an independent contractor doing things. And, because I make a lot of videos for companies and things like that, but it's like there's an endless amount of guitar pedals and gear and things that come out all the time. And it's can be everybody from somebody in, their garage in Greece or something, making a handmade pedal, to Boss, to Fender. So it's like, there's this worldwide, plug-in company in Russia, or, different. It's just so, I'm just so thankful for that. And,
what you said about, the treadmill of the sideman thing and the up and down. Yeah, it's not that you don't want to be on the road and that you prefer this to that, and that you did this just so you could not do that. It's not that at all. You did this just to avoid the up and down of that, and to have stability and be a responsible human being, which is that's such a positive thing. Like, it's like we want that stuff, and it gives you the freedom now to do the things you really want to do, and not just constantly be calling people and knocking down doors. And you've done some stuff on your own that helps you be stable, which is, I mean, not too much to ask, but it's very difficult in our business.
It is. As a musician, it's it's just a difficult path to choose when it comes to stability and being able to buy a home and provide for a family and all these things that most people want. So it's like, it gives you that extra measure and layer of security and independence from being in that treadmill. And you're absolutely right. I still love doing that stuff. But now if I want to take some time off, but there's been a lot of talk recently, like in the, the Olympics and stuff, about mental health.
Yeah.
And of course, with the pandemic, about mental health, like taking care of your own state of mind. Man, I mean, how many musicians do I know that went through the ringer in relationships and stuff because they always needed a gig or to travel to make money? It's so hard on a relationship and on a family, and it can be very difficult. So now you can pick and choose a little bit more and decide and be a little bit more, because, man, I mean, it used to be when made it plenty of times to come along where it's like, hey, here's this amazing gig. It's going to be France for the next 6 months and you can't go home.
Right.
I want to do it. It's a lot of money. It's like going to be a lot of fun. It's like great, but it's like, you're like, 6 months.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I did. I went, and of course, I go and do it, and I have a great time. And it's like the memories of, but it's not stressful on your personal life if you've got a relationship and stuff. It takes a toll. So it just gives you a little bit more freedom to pick and choose, because it can get to the point if all you do is tour, where you take pretty much, I mean, just about anything over losing your home.
Yes.
So, you'll just go. And it's like, it's always a trade-off. So it's just, here we are, real life. The
Oh,
reality.
always a trade-off, man. I mean, so how do you feel about, like, kind of, this is a ridiculous question, but how do you feel about, where you've ended up and the balance you've been able to create? Is it something that, you obviously you didn't go into it knowing this was where you were going to be or what you're going to be doing,
Yeah.
but is it something you're like at peace with? Is there still ways you want to change, moving forward, how you balance it out? Obviously also that's influenced by what's going on in our world right now. But how do you feel about it when you sit and think about it now?
I'm pretty happy, man. I mean, it feels good. I feel like kind of because most of the touring I did over the last 8 years or so uh, was mostly with foreign artists.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a French gig, and then I got a Japanese gig the year after that, which means artists based in those countries. And so I'm going over there and working mostly in Europe, and then in Japan. Then I got another French gig, and so all of a sudden these tours were taking me out of the country a lot and working elsewhere. Well, I took myself out of maybe the U.S. touring, like the art. This is like a network, that
Yeah.
MDs and folks that work that where you find out about things,
Mm-hmm.
just through the grapevine. So that's the only thing is I feel like I took myself out of that a little bit, and I don't want that to be the case. I want to have some of those options. So now I'm sort of actively trying to rekindle some of those, relationships and stuff, and let people know I'm available. I'd love to do some other work in the U.S. as well, not just outside of the country with different artists. So just working on that. It's always once again, it's a balance, but having said that, and there's some great things happening on that front, but having said that, I feel really good, like, about where I'm at, especially, I mean, during the pandemic, having the YouTube, it's just like, this was amazing to have to do during these times when so many of my friends
Yeah.
were not in good shape, with no work and trying to figure it out. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm lucky, man. I mean, I'm one of the lucky ones. I can't say that enough, honestly. And that said, it's interesting, like, I've kind of found myself in this place through all my heroes, like all the folks that I grew up listening to and really loving and enjoying were big influences on me. I know all these guys now.
Yeah.
It's crazy. They've all become friends, and it's like, um, and I talk to them often and stuff, and it's like, I think I've arrived. Like, this is where I wanted to be. Like, I wanted it took a long time to kind of get to that place, maybe, but it's so satisfying for me because it's just like, this is what I loved when I was 13 or 14, and now I'm here.
Yeah.
So,
It,
yeah.
it is so crazy, man. Like, I think you're, of these interviews I've done, the Flat Five interviews, I think you're the 62nd one that I've
Wow,
done.
it's a lot.
Now, they haven't all been released yet. I think I'm on 51 releases at the moment or something. I haven't missed a week until last week since the entire pandemic when I launched. So, but I purposely skipped last week, and I'll tell people why later. But I look at the list of all my friends, and they are, like, literally everyone on this list is someone I know. If half of that list, if I would have told the kid myself, per version of myself, I would know these people and they would be
Yeah.
my friends, is ridiculous to me. Completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's inspiring, I think, because you can do it. It's like, you want to be there, you can do it. You can get there, and be. I tell people now the kind of funny, like, I mentioned that the very first song I learned on the guitar was "I Can't Explain" by the Who,
Yeah.
and those power chords had just that impact of seeing Pete, like, at that age, the early '80s. It was right about the time when the Who took their first kind of hiatus, and
Sure.
Kenny was drumming in the band then, but I guess they decided to, this was going to be a farewell tour. Well, of course they end up coming back and stuff later, but 8-9 years later they get back together. But they just had so much impact on me at that age. Well, I mentioned that Frank went to play with Roger Daltrey, a little while ago in his solo band. When he did that, he hit me up and said, "I'm putting a band together for Roger now. Do you know some, like, keyboard player, bass player, and folks?" And I gave him some names,
Yeah.
and recommended some folks like Lauren Gold, John Button. Well, those guys got the gig.
Yeah.
And so now they're playing with Roger. Well, Lauren then got the gig in the Who playing keys. And then when Pino left to go tour with John Mayer in 2017, they just, it's like folks from Roger's band with a natural fit to slip right into touring with the Who. So now John Button's bass player in the Who. Yeah. Well, the Who was the first music I ever learned on the guitar. I referred the bass player that's in the band now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, if that's not full friggin' circle, I don't know what is, you know? And it just like, that blows my mind that like, you know, wow, I had a little bit of some kind of impact on the band that was like my initial, it was the Beatles and the Who was my thing, you know? And now that friend of mine is up there playing bass in that band.
Well, dude, and you said it's a small world with all these connections here. Now, I mean, I toured with Lauren for a year, you know what I mean?
There you go.
Gigs, you know, and Lauren actually did a song for Roger here at this studio for a project that has not come out. Like, we tracked this song for him for this record that hasn't been released yet. But yeah, it's like it is. It's such a small world how all that happens.
It really is. You find yourself, it gets smaller and smaller, and you know, and everybody's kind of the same. It's like we're all music. Everybody's in it to have fun and play music is what we love. And you realize that your heroes are pretty much like, that's why they started too, you know. And it's a really amazing,
crazy, man.
It's cool, and it all makes sense, you know. It all makes sense. But it's beautiful.
It is beautiful, man, dude. All right, after a slight wardrobe malfunction, we are now going to jump into the 10 questions. Number one, dudes, you talked about it actually yesterday, what the first thing was, so you probably already have the answer to this, but do you remember, you know, the first riff that when you figured it out, you were hooked, going back, there was no going back? It had to be Can't Explain, right?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that I could play that and it sounded like music, it's like, oh, that is the song. That's exactly how that song sounds, you know, was like when that light bulb went off. And that was also informed me instantly just through experience about how to teach and get kids hooked, because it was like, if they could make music on their first lesson, you know, Come As You Are by Nirvana, or that Metallica song that's all open strings, you know, or whatever it was that they were into. If you could show somebody something that sounded like, they were like, oh my God, I'm doing it. Like, you know, that was really important, I think, to getting hooked.
Yeah, it's like you learned a magic trick. You know what I mean? It just feels so kind of special. And it is. It's like there's no going back after that moment. You either hooked or you're not, you know. Yeah.
Yep.
Do you remember the first solo you ever like fell in love with and had to learn note for note once you started soloing?
A solo that I had to learn. You know, I think about that for a minute. But my first band, I can remember learning like songs like "Should I Stay or Should I Go" by The Clash, and like I just can't remember the first solo I learned. I remember learning "Stairway to Heaven" on my sister's nylon string guitar that she had borrowed, like it was like a rental from school.
Wow.
And so I can remember learning that, but I don't remember learning. I don't remember the first guitar solo I ever learned. It was a lot of songs. I was into learning actually you know, if I could make it sound like the song, like I say, like "Stairway to Heaven," if I could just pick through those first few chords, to get the chain. Oh, there it is. The finger picking, that was like magic to me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then that's 1 and 2. So 3, what's the first thing you play every time you pick up a guitar? Do your hands just go autopilot anywhere without even thinking about it?
Yeah, I generally speaking, I find I need to warm up to do anything. So I suck when I first pick up a guitar, generally speaking. So I'll just kind of start moving my fingers and doing like, you know, it's probably automatically goes to some sort of scale picking chromatic thing that just starts to get the blood flowing in my fingers. That's where I normally go. And I find that it takes me a good 15 minutes, maybe 20, to get to the point where I feel like, oh, there it is. Now I'm at whatever level of technical facility that I can muster. It's like, there it is. But initially, and I also have, like, I've always had issues with my hands being a little bit problematic. Like if I pick up and I try and do too much too fast, I'll get like nerve stuff or popping and I find the blood flow into my hands helps alleviate that. So I take it easy when I first pick up the guitar, and I've just kind of instinctively, that's so that I don't, you know, do that to my hands. And So it's nothing exciting when I first pick up the guitar, that's for sure.
Well, what about like when you're, at sound check and you flip standby for the first time on some backline and you don't know what you're gonna get? What do you play? We all have like that little thing we do that just lets you know if we're all right or not. You know what I mean?
It's probably an A chord and a big Led Zeppelin riff or something. You know what I mean? Like, like you just hit that, make sure everything's working, let all the strings ring thing. But there's nothing to me like a good solid A
Yeah.
chord for me. Is it working? But if you do that, you're in good shape.
Nice. All right, number 4. What key, style, song, or groove is the most like frequent visitor just in your mind when you're, cooking or walking around or driving when you're not listening to music? What just lives in there the most? For me, I hear a shuffle very, very often all the time. If I'm not doing anything, that's what sneaks in. What sneaks in the most for you?
For me, it's like riffs. I do a lot of writing when I'm not, like, sometimes I'll think of a riff and it's usually like more interesting than something I might do if I had the guitar in my hands initially. So like,
Right.
like I right away, like I'll start thinking, I'm thinking like a groove like this and that, or that tempo. And
Yeah.
probably like an F, sounds like F sharp to me, like some riff. And I'll go, they just like come out of nowhere sometimes. And I'm like, what's that riff? And then I'll sing it into my phone and then I'll go find it on the guitar later. But
Mm,
it's a lot of rock. It's really like riffy, Page influenced, or I guess Van Halen meets Page meets AC/DC meets whatever. But that's my, I
right.
hear riffs all the time and grooves, like a
Yeah.
groove that I like. I'll hear the drums and then a riff comes after that. It's like, oh yeah, it just comes out of nowhere.
So as a B side to that question, having worked so much, as just a working guitar player, when you first hear a piece of music you've never heard before, are you able to listen to it just for sheer enjoyment anymore, or are you immediately dissecting how you would have to learn it if you had to learn it, or what you would play on it if you were on a session? I've been wondering about that a lot myself lately, and the pandemic has been a lot of forcing myself to listen again, not in work mode, which I found I wasn't doing anymore.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's part of why I listen to a lot of non-guitar based music for enjoyment sometimes, because I really enjoy not knowing what's going on.
Right.
And listening as a, it's like I can imagine if you watch as a filmmaker, you're the cinematography, or oh god, the costumes are great or not so great, or whatever, like the things we don't think about when we're not professional
Sure.
filmmakers. Just enjoy, without always analyzing. We always, it's so I totally get what you're saying. It's it's funny. It's as a listener, we're always trying to find ways to categorize things. Oh, this new band I heard, they sound kind of like blah blah, right?
Yeah.
Without letting it just be its own thing, and we're also trying to. I tend to think many times I hear things as a writer like, oh, I wished it had gone here now to this place, and I can hear it in my head where this should have been a B section or a bridge or something here, and I do that, and that's hard. But when it's a perfect song, I tell you what, I listened to that new John Mayer record a while ago. I didn't have any of that, and that's guitar. He's writing from a guitar perspective. The way harmonically the chords are moving, and maybe because I really he's a guitar player and he's a great songwriter, and so all that resonates with me. But the way that I know he's a very John Shanks mentioned something to me a little while ago about that he sat with Mayer at one point. They were thinking about doing something together, some project, and John came in, and him from a producer standpoint was listening to John play songs, maybe on acoustic, I think, in his face, and just he goes, I was looking for the problems, and there was none. He played me about 5-6 songs solo acoustic, and it was just like that well, there it is. That's it. And so that's an intangible, but maybe a lot of music used to be like that. I mean, when I listen to an old Hall & Oates track or something, I'm never like, it should have gone there or whatever. Or you listen to Radiohead, I'm never like, I wish it would have done that or whatever. It's just like perfect. And there is that thing these days where I'll hear it and it'll be I sound like I'm bagging on new music because I don't want to too much. I think there's great new stuff out there too, but you know, many times it's like I find stuff a little pedestrian and safe, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and when I don't hear that, and it's refreshing, and I'll give John a nod for that because I think that a lot of the
Nice.
tunes on that new, you know, let's go. What's that one song called? Why You No Love Me?
Oh yeah.
Like that song's really cool. Or what's the other one? There's one called Deep Blue or something. That's really cool.
Something blue. Yeah. Yeah. I know.
Yeah,
what you're
love
talking
that. I mean, just great. So I just listened to it and I got lost. I was like, this is so good, you know. So, anyways, hats off to him when we don't feel those things and analyze it. How could it be better? And how could it's great when you hear something where that isn't your
Yeah, yeah. It's. I mean, that's. I've forced myself the last 6 months to. I actually don't do it here in the studio because I felt like I'm sitting in here. I'm always in some sort of headspace. So I built like a little place to listen to music back inside the house, and I forced myself to just sit down and listen to vinyl again, and just in general, even if it's streaming, and just listen. So like that record was one I just sat down and listened to it top to bottom, sitting in a chair. You know what I mean? And yeah, it helps me because normally something comes on, and I immediately either start analyzing it, or the other side of it is I start improvising over it in my head. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, I'd rather just listen.
I love that you brought that up because I think about these things too. And also, like when you go see a band live, not to go straight into a critical mode of what's wrong. Or maybe if you are going to think about what do I think about this and analyze, you come up with, if they're not very good, find the thing that's great because there is something. It could be
Yeah,
the
always.
bass player's shirt. That guy looks cool with that shirt. You know,
Yeah.
whatever it is, just go to the positive because there's always something good. That's a great drummer or whatever. Not so the rest, but focus on the thing you like that positive thing is, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's always something. Yeah.
Yeah, there's always something good, even with you know, the bad thing could be that that it's so offensive or whatever that I find it refreshing or whatever that it's like, God, they've got a lot of balls to get up and do this, you know, or whatever.
Yeah. Nice. All right, number 5. When did you feel like maybe you started to find your voice on the instrument, or do you feel that way at all? Like, was there any moments of clarity where it was like, oh, this is interesting, and I kind of feel like this is what I'm meant to do, or what I should sound like, and I go further that way, you know?
You know, it was really just doing my records. Like when I realized I kind of have a sound, like there's a thing where stylistically I know, like, you know, it's me, and so I hear you hear yourself all the time, but I go, well, that sounds like me, you know. It's a great feeling. Like it's why I can do things like now really enjoy putting up like little, you know, snippets of me playing a Uli Roth like I did the other day on Instagram.
Yeah, I saw that.
Van Halen. I can go in full Van Halen mode and just like enjoy, because I know I'm not like ripping off in, you know, like Eddie Van Halen or whatever in the like writing gave me the freedom to, you know what I mean? And putting out music. It's like, well, because anytime anybody accuses me of like, you know, oh, you're just trying to sound like or whatever, do like whatever. It's like, well, I do have 2 records out, you know, that don't actually sound anything like that. So you can go, it's this freeing thing where it's like, here's what I do. It's my stamp of like, now I can go be a sideman in other bands or do this gig or do that job or have some fun playing some Van Halen or whatever. And it's just like a fun, that's like one aspect of what you do. But it was really just releasing the albums. And then I guess maybe 6 months later, a year later, whatever it takes to get a little distance from it, then you come back and listen to it. And you're like, you maybe hear things you would have done different or whatever, but if, you know, you're your own worst critic before you put it out, and you put it out and hopefully you're proud of it. You listen to it and you're like, good job.
Yeah.
That was hard work. You pat yourself on the back a little bit, you know, and you've got a thing, you've got a little sound, you know. So,
yeah. Nice. Number 6. What do you consider your biggest weakness on the guitar?
Oh, dude, what you do, living in that improv land of being just my vocabulary is. Some people say, oh, wow, you can do so many things like stylistically. And I'm like, and I always appreciate that, but I don't feel like I'm, you know, like someone like you, I feel like has a really deep knowledge. When I hear you talk, it's just apparent. And when I see you play and hear you play, it's apparent. I'm a little bit more of a street ear player. And I don't know what I'm doing a lot of the time. So I guess just getting a little bit more into that flow of, and living in that improv world like you do, that's my biggest deficiency on the instrument, is being able to really express myself in that head to hands. And that thing that you're so great at, is something where I'm not as great at that, and I could stand to theoretically and also application do that more, so that I could live in that land a little bit more. It's what I think when David Gilmour talks about Jeff Beck, he's like, I'm a guitar player, he's a guitar player, but he does a thing he's living on that edge all the time of that improvisational. I mean, the thing that Jeff does, and Dave's like, I don't like he's got a great admiration for, because Dave will be a much more not copying note for, but a lot of those solos that he plays are like, Gilmour's an interesting cat, because he's like, it's blues sort of, very blues based, but a lot of it is either written or at least maybe learned after he cut the solos and repeated.
It is very, what, he's someone who's fascinated me, because as a guy who has a legion of people who he's their guy, or all these guys, Gilmour's a guy, it's very composed what he plays, while still having a ton of emotion to it, which is very difficult to do.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's a little like Felder's kind of like that. I mean, he, Hotel California,
that's a good comp.
You can't do the, to me, it's like improv. It's amazing. Like improv is the ultimate, expression. Watching somebody like you or Landau, like being able to speak through the guitar in an instant. It's like it's part of their being, like that is so magical to me. And no two things are ever the same. And then you've got some of the greatest solos of all time, like Comfortably Numb or Hotel California or whatever, which is obviously composed, and that's equally as valid. So it's like, it's really interesting. It's a little more like classical music, I guess, where you're just interpreting play what's on the page sort of thing, but you do it with emotion and the right, intention, and it's very enjoyable too.
Well, yeah, and it is. I mean, there's a difference even when you go watch classical music. Sometimes you see a guy play a piece perfectly and you feel nothing. Other times you see a guy play a piece perfectly, but oh my God, it's like you feel it right here. It's the same thing, like Brian May. It doesn't matter how many times I hear him play the solo to, Bohemian Rhapsody. It's like, wow, because he puts inflection on it. He's playing it in the moment, even though it's super composed,
Yeah, it's like a singer singing a great melody, and I guess to me that's the best solos are. They're not necessarily like it's a part of the song in a melodic. I mean, there's Hotel California, I mean, it's so, it's, when we think of Hotel California, the vocal melody is pretty static, actually. Like, on a dark desert highway, cool wind in my hair. It's two notes, warm smell like a lead, right? But then you've got all this beautiful harmonic movement going through it, and then the solos and the guitar harmonies and stuff are really where a lot of that, the interesting melodicism in the song actually is like, right? So it's a fascinating thing that way. And so some of the best solos, to me are definitely, and the Eagles was great. That's actually, there's so many good ones there. I can't tell you why, and like all these beautiful guitar parts. Anyways.
Yeah, I've gotten in fights with a lot of my more, snobby musos about the Eagles, because I'm a guy who likes the Eagles, and there's a lot of us who are like, not Eagles fans. I never understand that,
Yeah, well, you've got a great, I mean, your outlook on so many of these things is so positive that, like I say, like your whole outlook on NAMM kind of turned me around. You're like, hey man, there's guitars there, all my friends are there. They're there I go all 4 days. I love it. And I was like, God, that's healthy. Like that's it, because every NAMM. Really?
Well, it's funny. I noticed that so much from so many of my friends. They would start complaining before they even got to NAMM the first day. Oh, fuck, I got to go to NAMM. I got to shake this guy's hand and thank these guys. And I'm like, you mean you have to thank these guys for giving you free guitars and for putting you in a guitar magazine? And you got to shake people's hands who like what you do and see all your friends? It's like, it's the best. I love that.
It's awful. Yeah. Oh, God, it sounds like heartbreaking. It's like, go dig a ditch and then come back and talk.
Exactly.
No, really, you were the one. You really, it's kind of like I was saying about finding, what's cool about the band. Well, the bass player's shirt is great. Like, just turn around your way of thinking about, and realize, it's not
that's funny, man.
The end of the world.
I still love it. I think it's because the first time I went, It was a bar mitzvah gift for my 13th birthday. I flew out here from Florida and went with my uncle. And as a 13-year-old guitar player, obsessive guitar player, I was just, it felt like I was in heaven. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
Disneyland.
I literally bumped into Brian Setzer, turned around, and then bumped into Steve Morse. And I was like, what the fuck is going on here? You know what I mean?
This is
like,
the greatest thing in the world. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Man, did I ever tell you about before I'm sorry to interrupt the questions, but the first time I went, I flew down to go in I was working in a music shop in Canada. I would have been 18, I think.
Uh-huh.
And I got to go and I was so excited. And everybody from the store wore suits. So I had to wear a suit, which I was bummed about, but I was like, whatever, I'll wear a suit. I don't care.
Right.
And so I wore a suit and I got up my first day to go and we'd flown into LA the day before and we'd gone to a hockey game and I ate a hot dog at the Forum, I remember. And so here I am, the kid from Canada. It's fun. I'm in LA. I'm at the Forum watching a game. We're doing a NAM the next day. Well, I wake up the next day. And I'm like, oh no, I gotta go to the show. And I made it all the way to the Hilton and I ran into the back hallway and found a trash can and just hurled the trash can.
God.
And I had the brutal food poisoning. And I know it was that fucking hot dog, but anyways, I got a taxi. I had to get a cab back to my hotel and I couldn't go. Like, imagine me I've been guitar obsessed my whole teenage. It's just NAM. Here we go. I just went back to the hotel. I could barely stand and I got in bed but it was a 24-hour thing. So the next day, it was Friday or whatever, I was up, ready to go, put on my damn suit, and went to NAM. So, but that sucked that first day, not being able to go.
Arena hot dogs, Jesus.
Yeah.
Oh man. All right. Number 7. I'm curious about this. Who's a big influence on your guitar playing that like people would be surprised to hear is big for you?
Surprised to hear. Well, I mean, it could be I went through a big Albert Lee phase where he, really knocked me out. And I bought like an instructional book and a cassette. I remember an Albert Lee cassette and started learning all these licks, and sort of playing through simple changes and doing those fast country licks. That was like something I worked on for a while and I really enjoyed. Some other players, maybe the Sex Pistols, like, the whole Steve Jones, just kind of like hearing that record at 10 or 11 and just like, what is this music? Like, that was so explosive and crazy. So that was one to the other right there. What about, that's 2 good ones. I mean, I kind of listened to everything. I absorbed a lot of it and really liked it. And I saw the similarities between, certainly like something like The Who and Steve Jones, like the Pistols was just like a more raw version of that aggressive expression of, so anyways, but that's a couple, I would say.
Nice. All right, I'm going to adapt number 8 to fit you specifically because normally I say, would you rather have a good guitar and a shitty amp or vice versa? So I'll ask you in a gig situation, would you rather have a Pete Thorn signature Sur guitar into a JC 120 or would you rather have some shit guitar into a PT 100 amp?
I feel like the amp is actually more vital. If your guitar won't stay in tune, then you got real problems. So like everybody's always like, like tone this, pickups that and stuff. I'm like, does it intonate? Can you get it in tune? Because if you can, it doesn't matter the rest of it. Yeah. So I just sort of.
So let's say it's an intonatable Squire into your Pete Thorn signature amp or your Pete Thorn signature guitar into a crate or a JC 120 on a gig. Which scenario is better for you?
Yeah, I'll probably take that Squire into the amp because the amp to me is such a, like the speaker is just, the cabinet is 50% of the sound that shapes the overall thing, with the 120, it's like, I'm going to be, you ever have those friends in the 80s that ran pedals into a JC 120?
Oh, yes, I did. Yeah.
It's like a certain kind of heinous that was, no guitar will fix, but you got a good amp with a Squire. I can make good sounds with that. I
just remember, without naming names, being in high school, I have a good friend who we were the same age and we were starting to play gigs. I was playing gigs already. He started a band with other high school friends of ours. And he went to go buy his first real amp loud enough for gigs, non-practice amp. And around the same time I did. So I bought a Silverface Pro Reverb because I was smart. And he bought a JC 120. and he was playing these gigs with like Les Paul Tube Screamer into JC 120, and it was horrendous, horrendous.
Yeah.
And I couldn't understand, like, dude, what made you buy this amp? And he's like, well, it's loud. It's really loud and clean. I'm like, yeah, it's really loud shit. Yeah. He got rid of it pretty quick. I think it only lasted a couple months, and his parents were mad. He took a hit on it to trade it back at the music store. It was a new one. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And what did he get?
Then he got, I think he got a Hot Rod DeVille or something like that. They had just come out, maybe the first
okay.
one. Yeah. Yeah.
Workable. Yeah.
There you go. All right. Number 9. And by the way, I'm with you 100% on the amp. I always answer amp, not guitar. Although it's been split in like 60 of these interviews, I bet it's 50-50.
If I can get it in tune, I almost prefer. Okay, here's the one thing about guitars for me. I'm really picky about like if the guitar's set up good, like, and it's one of my. So if it's a nice guitar with a good setup, I'm great. If it's a nice guitar but the neck is a little bowed or something, and I'm like and it bothers me all night, it sucks. But if I've got a Squire, as long as it'll be in tune, even if the actions, like, I'd almost prefer that it's like, okay, like your guitar's got 13s. I'd almost prefer like a different, like, if it's got higher action and kind of hard to play, okay, I can make this work. I will just play differently. I'll play more deliberate. It's like picking up one of Michael Thompson's guitars. If you've ever done that, it's like the action's like a slide guitar, and and he's like, yeah, I like that. It makes me play more deliberate, slows me down, like makes me play more. And I'm like, I kind of got it when I played his guitar. It's like, oh yeah, it's so far off the realm of easy to play that you almost in some ways play better because it's more, you play with more intention, a little bit more vibrato, and it's kind of cool in a way.
It absolutely ratchets up your concentration, which is never a bad thing. And when people ask me, it's one of the reasons I play the heavy strings I do. It's not the main reason, but I do like the mindset required to play them, especially on a gig. It's like, well, when I pick up and feel it, it's like, yep, I can't phone this one in. I gotta play hard, I gotta play.
Yeah, sure.
All right, number 9. What keeps you pushing and learning new things and growing as a guitarist? Because I mean, when you've done as much as you've done and you worked with as many people, been as successful as you are, and at least you're a working musician, you've have, no matter if it's the success level you wanted to reach, you have had some success. We're lucky to a lot of degrees. So what keeps you, putting in the time to work on new shit and grow?
I still get fired up. Like the other day that I mentioned the Uli Roth thing, I put it on the other day. I was actually trying to come up with inspiration for a video that I'm doing, and I thought, why don't I go back and listen to let's go back and listen to some old hard rock and metal and stuff. So I put on some Scorpions, and I hadn't listened to that in a long time, and I was listening to Uli, and I was like, I got to learn that right now, and I just picked up the guitar. It's the same thing that it always was for me. Like when I was 14, it's just like, oh, get the guitar, and you're just like, that's so badass. And then I put it in transcribe, start slowing it down. It's like a thing I don't even think about. Like it's still just the same as it always was. It's just that excitement about, ooh, what's he doing? And then you want to, it's like putting together a puzzle, and then if you can get it, you play it. There it is. You see me do it in the video. Actually, it's on IG, and I put it up
I saw it
a couple days ago, and it's like, I'm just like, damn, boy, because I'm really like excited about it. It's fun.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's where my happy place.
It is. I mean, it's when I think about it, it's just, I hope it never goes away, because it's such an important part of my life. Like I just want that feeling all the time. And now it's not even just guitar anymore like it used to be when I was a kid. It's, I put on a record and it may be, oh my God, how am I going to get that kick drum sound? I got to figure out how to get that kick drum sound. I'm going to go out to the studio right now and record myself playing kick drum and try to get that sound, and as long as those moments keep happening, we're good, Yeah.
We're good, man. I mean, that's it. I feel the same way about recording engineering, or about, coming up with cool drum sounds, or I really enjoy it. Like, it's just like, it's like painting when you're a kid, finger painting or whatever you're doing. You're just throwing things at the wall and you're like, what can I do? It's so much fun. And I do too. I hope it never goes away, but it never has for me. That's always I guess I always had a healthy appreciation of, that's the magic time. Like the most fun is when you're listening to the mix you just did of the song that you recorded, that hopefully, if it wasn't a laborious, task or whatever, that and you're listening back and you're not thinking about like, oh, we got to put this out. And is it a hit? And is it, you're not thinking about any of that. You're just like, listen to what we did. It's so cool. Like for you.
Yeah, it is so
much fun.
cool. So during this pandemic, didn't you find it interesting? Because I'm assuming you probably have some friends. I definitely have some friends who, for the first year, I have some friends who didn't play, just like whatever, I'm not playing, and I couldn't understand. Like, well, don't you just need to play for you, just
Yeah.
because you have to? And some of my friends were not that way, and that took me by surprise.
Yeah. Well, I think I get it in some ways if there isn't a purpose or they just didn't feel inspired. So I've had some friends that said that, and I don't understand that necessarily because I haven't been there, but I understand it in another way. If it's like if you're just not feeling like that's your thing right now, it can be good to go do something else, I guess, for a minute, go take up cycling or like, go do something that, because it'll probably come back. But I know what you mean. It's for me, I mean, that's always been my get lost. It's my therapy. It's like, I remember John Five talking about it in an interview once, where he said, I just have to kind of play every day because I can't remember if he said he suffers from certain sort of, anxiety or whatever it was, but he mentioned that guitar for him has always been a therapy of sorts, that he just has to play because and I get that it takes it's like meditating. It requires 100% of your focus.
Yeah.
And you don't have all this extraneous stuff coming in from, the world and making you anxious or whatever. It requires your focus. And you know how you can play and like, you could be in a bad mood or have something going on, and then you get inspired or focused on something, you're working on it, and a half an hour later, you forgot about that thing. You're in a different mood. You're in a different headspace.
Yes.
And gigs are like that for me too. When I get on stage, as long as everything's working good and the sound is pretty good, I start playing. I could have had a shitty day or whatever. I get on stage, start playing. After the third song, that's all gone.
Yeah.
And you're in this other. So it's so therapeutic.
Yeah. I mean, it's always been for me. If I'm in a really good mood, what do I want to do to continue that? I want to go pick up my guitar. I'm really in a great mood. I want to go play. If I'm in a really bad mood, what am I going to do to make myself feel better? I'm going to play guitar. You know what I mean? Like that's the way it's always been. But everybody's different.
Yeah, it's super therapeutic. It really is. It's my happy place too.
It's
Getting immersed in. I was just talking about on my live stream actually a little bit earlier about I was talking to Chris Cornell once about like, because he was like this too. He was really like, like at the heart, he was just loved creating and writing songs and working on things and stuff. And I said, do you ever forget to pee? Like, you ever forget to go to the bathroom? Because you're so in it that you've almost turned off you forget how hungry you are until you're ravenously hungry, or you keep pushing it, keeping it at bay because you're just so excited, like working on this idea or mixing or whatever it is. And you're like, oh my God, I'm literally going to like wet my pants if I don't run to the bathroom right now. I do that. I forget,
Yeah. I don't do that, but I forget to eat all the time. That's my biggest one. Like, I just wait a minute. I've been out here for 8 hours. I haven't eaten anything yet today. Like, yeah. That happens a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Well, number 10. Where do you want to be 5 years from now? Like, what do you see? Do you have a checklist? Or you guy makes goals, a list of goals that needs to be accomplished? Or is it more just continue what's going on and kind of, go with the flow?
I'm pretty happy with the direction I've been going. I would love to have another tour or a few tours under my belt of, cool, fun stuff that we talked a little bit earlier about stuff that, being able to pick and choose a little more. So just some fun. I want to continue on that path. I'm not done those things. But also I'm at that point in my life where I'm like, I'm feeling pretty responsible these days with like, just financially and trying to keep myself on a good path so that I'm not abusive to myself in my old age. So that I'm like, setting myself up a little bit to be like, okay in that regard. So I feel like I'm making decisions that feel good in that sense. Whereas maybe as musicians, we're reckless for a number of years. Like, we don't have health insurance, or we're young though, it's okay. And then it's like, at some point you're like, I should probably take care of this. And probably start thinking about putting some money away for a rainy day and things like that. So I've been spending time on that stuff too. So just kind of continuing on, I've been really lucky, like the synergy between my work and being able to make a living at it, and have a good time, and then also funnel that into that side, like business wise and personal. So I'm just like kind of everything I do is kind of a focus on like, let's make sure that we're okay later on down the road and stuff like that. And so I'm just kind of I'm kind of enjoying that aspect of life right now, being a grown up, and like, and so, but having said that, like I don't have kids, and so that's another thing, like where completely kind of open to like that being, it's like it's kind of, I don't feel like it's now or never, but sort of like, you get to a certain age, and I don't want to be like 80 years old and driving a kid to colleges, looking around it like that doesn't seem like a good idea. So you want to have the energy and stuff so if I'm going to do that, that's another thing. So I'm thinking about all these things, like, it's time to kind of settle down a little bit and whatnot too, while continue. I'm very focused on continuing doing what I do and love, and furthering. This is, I've really gone far into developing some signature gear, and the amplifiers, the guitars, pickups, and certain things that way, and I really enjoy that too. So all that is continuing, and I like that aspect too, and I want to do more of that because it feels good to me. That's because I love guitars and pickups. So working on that. Probably doing another album. It's probably about time to start, or at least an EP. To come up soon within the next little while here. I'm not even sure that full albums are the best way to do things anymore. It's like a lot of pressure to come up with 11 or 12 songs and do the whole, and you kind of put it out, and then maybe 2 weeks later everybody's moved on to something else. That's just the world we live in. So I almost think like singles or EPs, like on a more regular basis, is kind of the way to go. And so that feels good to me to think about that.
Yeah, you need to keep continued interaction happening, and keep people connected to you. And it's like, you put out a record and then wait a year or 2 years for another record. It doesn't happen. Whereas if you take that same record and put out one song a month for a year,
Exactly.
I
think it's better. And then what if you do that, and then when you get to 10 songs, you bundle it with an 11th and finally release it as an album with some sort of special package or something, and there was your record. I think that makes a lot of sense.
That being said, I'm probably about to release another record on its own, and not do it that way, even though I'm preaching it, because it's hard to get yourself out of the romantic, nostalgic feeling of making a record and having it be a complete statement and all of that. I think you almost have to make a head shift of even recording the songs and writing the songs with the intent of having them be individual things. You know what I mean? That's where I'm kind of seeing myself going. If I go that way you're talking about, is just treating every song almost like its own project, and promoting it and releasing it like its own project.
Absolutely. I mean, we talked about John's record. It's this 80s theme as a whole, and so that makes sense to do that as a record. What we're talking about wouldn't have made as much sense. It's cool the way that he did it and packaged it with the sticker on the front that says the nice price and all that, like all those references that only guys that are old enough like us get.
Like my son will have no idea what any of those references are.
On Columbia Records and Tapes.
Exactly.
I love that he did that.
I was waiting for him to have a Columbia House kind of ad or something, like, buy John Mayer's record and get 10 other records for a penny.
Yeah. I know. I'll never forget seeing Stuart Ham play a gig in LA in the 90s, and he got up on stage. He played a couple songs at the Roxy, I remember. And after a couple songs, he said, "Well, everybody congratulate me. I signed a big record deal today. Signed a 10 album deal with Columbia Records." Everybody's clapping. Wow, 10 album deal. That's crazy. He's like, "Yep. You buy one, you get another 10 for a penny."
Yep. And then every month you get that tape, whether you want it or not.
That's right.
Oh.
So funny. That was a good joke.
I did it though. I'm sure you did it, right?
I think I did, yeah. And probably, and then you're roped in,
I remember getting my shipment and opening it up and having, oh man, I'm outing myself right now. But I had Warrant, Dangerous Toys, Enough's Enough, Slaughter, like it was, you know, the whole box full of 80s terribleness, but whatever. That's what it was.
Come on now, some of that's pretty, enough's enough is pretty cool.
What was their song? I can't even remember that song.
I don't remember. I can't
Do you remember
remember.
Dangerous Toys though? Come on.
They were more like, you know, it was more Chicago. Wasn't enough's enough a little more like, you know, like 80s Cheap Trick or like, you know, like it had a little bit more of a, they had a little bit of a Beatley thing going on.
Yeah, it was a little more glam and like
Yeah.
poppy. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Dangerous Toys. This was getting into the late 80s where, you know, it was like when no slag on any of those bands or anything, but you know, when it happened, when Soundgarden and everybody came along, it kind of needed to happen.
It was, yeah, everybody needed to be taken behind the woodshed at that point.
Little bit.
Yeah. Oh, nice, man. Well, we reached the end of the 10 questions. I'll have links to all things Pete Thorn in the body of this video. So please support Pete, buy his guitars and his amps and his records, and subscribe to his channel, of course, here on YouTube. Dude, thank you for doing this, man. Always a pleasure getting a chat, and nice to know more of your story now.
Yeah, man. Hey, I really appreciate it. This was super fun. And anytime you want to have me, you know, I'd love to be on your show or, you know, it's great. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, man. And if you're not a ruler, you should become a ruler, or at least subscribe to the channel now, because if you are a ruler, you get, you know, exclusive videos and all sorts of shit. So, but dude, thank you, man. And that's it. We made it.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.